that meant that I ended up with a failing company, 65K's worth of debt, then very, very quickly turned into just under, there was about 80K in the end by the time all the interest been added, all the court orders, bailiffs banging on the door. By the time all the fees, all the costs, all the interest, and actually it got stabilized properly, it was about just under £82,000 worth of debt that I had labelled to me.
Hello and welcome to the We Built This Business podcast, the place for UK entrepreneurs and business owners who want to build a multi-million-pound business. I'm Daniel O'Sullivan, founder of Red Cactus Events, Team Building Experiences and Shizoo Media. Speaking with some of the UK's most successful entrepreneurs, I will unpack their journey from startup to where they are today. If you want to build a multi-million-pound business, you're in the right place. In this episode, I'm speaking with Joel Campbell. I discussed with Joel how he recovered from his failed business that left him with £80,000 in debt to running multiple businesses and buying the world's oldest prison. Let's head over to the podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have Joel Campbell on the We Built This Business podcast, talking about how he has built the Cove Group. Joel, welcome to the podcast.
Okay, thank you.
So, Joel, let's start by talking, what exactly does the Cove Group do?
That's a really good question, and sometimes I'm not even sure I can answer it. Funny enough, I had a meeting about that this morning. The way I look at Cove Group is it's ultimately our parent company, if you will. It's the top piece of our businesses, and ultimately I separate it into three pillars, which is the businesses that we own and operate. So those are businesses that we've started from absolute scratch, or I've built from absolute scratch and built them up to where they are today. And that's very much our businesses and kind of what we do. And that's also what drives a lot of the income through into Cove Group is our businesses. And we've got different businesses we'll talk about as we go through in different divisions, in different areas, different spaces, different industries. Then we have our investment side of things, which is something that I've been trying to get going for a little while, which is basically a very small investment fund that we have that we put into other businesses. Other businesses are starting to grow, and predominantly I tend to utilize that more for the seed capital funding. But it'll be for very small companies looking for a small amount of money, a couple of £1,000s here, a couple of £1,000s there, those kind of funding website sort of businesses and such like that. So I try and keep that pot kind of there, kind of moving really and continuously topped up to go. And then the third pillar, which I always think is the most exciting and one I would love to spend pretty much all of my time in, but it's the one that I spend the least amount of time in, ironically, I guess, is that entrepreneur pillar, which is where I want to support startup businesses or startup entrepreneurs, regardless of their age, so new entrepreneurs in their journey to creating their visions and their businesses, because from going through it, from having the failures, from having some successes and the highs and lows, that roller coaster ride, I feel that there's an awful lot that I can provide in terms of knowledge and resource just to help people navigate really through that world. So that's kind of how Cove Group split. So it's kind of got that overarch. It's got a business commercial mind, but it's also got very much how do I give back and how do I do something that's more than just a commercial venture effectively. And that's how it splits, really.
Fantastic. So those three pillars, let's start with that first one in just a little bit more detail. So can you tell us some of the businesses that are in that first pillar?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that people know us for the most is our attraction division. So we have a Cove Attractions company or a Cove Attractions division. And within that, we run a number of different tourism attractions. So we are quite unique. We run decommissioned prisons and we develop those into tourist attractions. So we have three decommissioned prisons. We've got Shetland Mallet Prison in Somerset, which is the oldest prison in the world. And we operate that as a tourist attraction. We started that in 2017, although I came up with the idea from it way back, sort of a decade before that. And that's been operating, like I say, as a heritage-led tourism attraction for a number of years. And we've actually just purchased the building, so I'll come on to that for sure. Then we operate Shrewsbury Prison or Shrewsbury Prison, depending on how you say it in the Midlands.
Yeah, I'm a Shrewsbury.
Yeah, they always tell me it's whichever side of the river you come from. So it doesn't matter. Someone's going to throw something at you, whichever way you say it. So yeah, we operate Shrewsbury Prison, or we own Shrewsbury Prison in Shropshire, so the West Midlands. And again, we operate that as a heritage-led tourism attraction, slightly different to Shetland, but similar kind of style of tourist attraction. And then we have Peterhead Prison up in Scotland, up in the Aberdeenshire area, so very much northeast coast, Highlands, which is in Peterhead. Is a beautiful place on the coast, so it overlooks the sea, and that's a new one that we've taken on over the last 6 months, where we've taken on the operations and the process and the development basically of that place. So that's what our attraction world does. And within that, we've got loads of different arms, from the guided tours that we'll do, the ghost tours, the educational side of things, the corporate team building, the overnight stays, all the events, the activities, the escape rooms, and everything that you would imagine basically comes with an attraction, as well as restaurants, cafes, gift shops, and all that kind of stuff. Then we have, in some of our different pillars, so we have our property arm, which is fairly traditional for a company that wants to make sure it's commercially sound and commercially stable. We have a property arm, which is where we put any of the properties that we purchase, basically. So we own all of our own prisons now, which is a process we went through over a number of years. We started off leasing them and licensing them, and eventually it was like, actually, it's going to be better for us to own these. We can develop them in a different way. So that's what we've done. And we have another couple of heritage properties. I don't know why we always buy heritage properties. I think there's a draw to it.
Is it the maintenance?
It's mad. It's mad that we do it, because they're so out of any building you buy in it, they're the most complex and they're the hardest ones to do. But I also think they're the most fun. So yeah, so we've got a couple of those that we're sort of working on different plans, and that's an area that I do quite enjoy as well. We've got a small event arm, which actually has been in a hiatus for a little while, and we're sort of looking at how that reinstates itself. It sort of went through a hiatus sort of just post-COVID, really. And that really was an immersive event company called Immersive Events. I like to keep things simple, which really builds, delivers, and operates immersive events and such like that. So that's one that I need to look at, what we're going to kind of do with that and how that's going to reform, really. And then I've got a very small media company, which again was a new startup that I envisaged out the back of COVID. And I've been trying to get that going probably now for, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years. And it's just been a time thing. I just haven't had the time to get into it. And that's something I'm really trying to focus on for 2025, is to get that company going, because again, it's an enjoyment and passion. And I think I got to a point where I was like, that startup was cool, let's do that. And then probably, I don't know, 50, 100, maybe even 1,000 other ideas of other things that we could do and other businesses we could start. And then for some crazy reason, I decided that it would be a really smart idea to start building hotels. So we're just in the embryonic stages, really. It's the very beginning stages of building our hotels, getting planning permissions in, starting that entire journey. And off the back of that, I looked at it and went, do you know what? I want to run the hotels. I don't want another operator to come in and do it. I want us to do it. So we're in the process of creating Cove Hotels, which will end up operating and running hotels is the plan.
You probably have got the most interesting business I've ever heard of. And I can't wait to get into it. So let's start from the beginning, Joel. So you've left school. What happens next? Are you already thinking you're going to be on that entrepreneurial journey?
If I go back just slightly further, I'll go back. I remember 8 years old. It's one of my probably earlier memories, but certainly it sticks with me very clearly. I was with my mum and my sister, and we were driving to a local town. So I grew up in the countryside. So we're driving to a local town. We went past a garage, a really kind of rundown, beaten up garage. Think kind of as you would imagine it in like Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of style garage. And we drove past it, and I just saw 8 years old in the back seat. And I just said to my mother and my sister, I was like, one day I'm gonna own that. And I'm going to buy that. I'm going to own that. And they were like, why? And I went, I don't know. It just looks cool. It just looks good. And I think that probably for me was where, certainly the earliest memory I can remember of that sort of entrepreneurship and kind of where that started. And I think that I was just writing a blog this morning actually about something where I was talking about how I'm not academic really at all. I really struggled in school. I found it really, really hard. I skipped a lot of school. I was very fortunate to come from a very good background and have every sort of opportunity provided for me, but I just wasn't good at school. And in the 80s and 90s, if you weren't good at school, you were kind of just labeled with that sort of troublemaker or that problem child. And I think what that did for me was I became very good at the activity side. So I was really good at PE. I was really good at drama, pretty good at technology and especially catering. But yeah, anything academic, I just hated. I just didn't want to be that. I didn't want to do it. And I was never going to do it. I was too stubborn to do it. So I think that was problematic. And when I got to the end of my time in school during my GCSEs, I was actually working full time at a local pub as a waiter. So I was literally finishing a shift in the morning and cycling in to take a GCSE, or doing a GCSE in the morning and cycling to the pub or to go work a shift. So I did no time revising whatsoever at all. And I basically did that. And then when I left school, I had no idea what to do at 16, because you could leave at 16 back then. And my mum said, why don't you look at doing like a catering course? You like cooking, you like, doing applying yourself like that. So I enrolled in a catering course at a local college. I didn't get the GCSE results to get in. So I just made them up. So when they gave me the form and I had to go for enrollment, and they went, hey, write down your GCSE results. And obviously it's back in the day where everything was on paper. And I had the letter of my GCSE results, and I needed to get 4 C's and I hadn't. So I just wrote down next to everything that I had 4 C's, I had B's and C's, and they never checked it. And they never asked but for the letter from there. So I went to catering college and trained as a chef. So I initially trained as a chef for a couple of years, and I went through a number of different jobs and careers through my late teens into my 20s. And I didn't actually start my first proper business, my first registered legal business, I should say. So I had one when I was 11, until I was 28.
So before we dive into that one, what was the business you had when you were 11?
I used to go to Glastonbury Festival every year. My dad
right.
used to work at Glastonbury Festival. So I went from the early 90s all the way through the 90s into the early 2000s. And again, I was super fortunate. I've got to see some of the biggest bands in the world, like Oasis and stuff like that, in their heydays and the original. So I've got to see some amazing things. And I was there, I was 11 years old, so 11 about to turn 12. And I came across these guys running this promotion stall for kickers. Do you remember the shoes, kickers?
Yeah.
And they had these rubber key rings, which were in the shape of the shoe. It just had kickers across them. And their job was just to give them out. They were just giving them out to people. And people walking past, I was just giving them away and stuff like this. I was looking at these guys, just giving these things away. I was like, why don't they sell one? Everybody's taking one. Everybody they offer something to was taking one. Because it was Glastonbury in the early 90s, everybody was having an amazing time. I was just watching, I was like, why didn't they just sell those? They'd make a load of money. So I went to chat to them. I was like, guys, what are you doing? And they were like, we're doing this promotion for kickers. And they must have been, I don't know, 18, 19. They were young lads themselves, stoned out of their trees, like absolutely wasted. And it was like, we're just doing this. And I said, well, I'll do that for you if you want. That looks like fun. Do you want me to do that? And they thought like that just everything had come together. This like 11, 12-year-old was going to suddenly do their job and they could just go off and enjoy the festival. So from underneath,
win-win.
Yeah, underneath the table, they literally pulled these 2 massive sacks out of these kickers' key rings. I went, cool, there you go. And they just went and they were gone. So I just started selling them. I went like, key rings 5 pence. And again, and people just started going, yep, no worries. Started buying them. I was like, this is easy. So I was like, Keyrings, 10 pence. And they were like, yeah. And it just started selling. And I got to 20 pence. And then I think I got to 50 pence. And they were just going and people just doing it. And again, back in the early 90s, it was, a little bit of cash basically for people to have, but everything was obviously cash. And then the friends that were also there, they came along and they saw what I was doing and they were like, oh, can we do this? And I was like, yes. And I will pay you, I can't remember what it was. I think it was like 20 pence, 10 or 20 pence for every keyring that they sold. And I kept 30. So I then gave them the bags and they started selling it. And I was just like, this is great. And like, so all of this cash came back in. They made money. I made money. Everyone got keyrings. Everyone was happy. I assume kickers are happy because their keyrings went out. So that happened. And I had this hard lesson and learned that very same day where I'd sort of seen an opportunity, started a business, got a customer, sold it, made money. That was all going well. And then obviously we ran out of keyrings. So they all went and we had a good amount of money, but no product left. And suddenly this business then just collapsed. And like my staff were out of work and there was like my customers couldn't get what they needed and I didn't have any product. And I think I probably spent a good chunk of the rest of the festival looking for those guys, see if they had any more keyrings. And that was my first journey into kind of, that whole world really.
I think that might be the greatest story of capitalism in 24 hours I've ever heard.
It was. Yeah. And I can't even remember how much money we made, but it was good. It was a profitable day. I was happy with it. Yeah.
So let's go to when you started your first business, like you said, legally.
Yeah.
28.
Yeah. Officially. Yeah. Registered on Company's House. I should say.
Officially on Company's House.
Yeah.
So what was that business and what drove you to start it?
So that was an employee wellness company is probably the best way of describing it. So I knew I'd known my entire life I wanted to run my own company. I dabbled in it when I was traveling in Australia in pyramid schemes, and I'd spent lots of time with loads of people that had companies, and I was just that's what I want to do. But I didn't know what I wanted to do it in. I had no idea. So I got myself into a career in health and well-being, health and fitness, and it really kind of made quite a nice career for myself in my 20s and leisure. And I'd been working in a leisure company, so in a group of leisure centres, effectively, in a leisure trust. And we were working on some really good technology. I was working as part of a project lead on activity tracking devices. So if you go way back to when the Nike Plus first came out, so the Nike chip that was in the shoe, and you could track your activity long before Fitbit or any of those kind of things. And the company that designed that had just put it into a device that you could basically clip onto your shoe and it would download onto your computer and you can measure and monitor your health and activity. So I was working with them running programs in schools because we had lots of leisure centres on school premises. So I was working with like year 10, year 11 students, sixth form students in terms of tracking their health and their activity really through these devices. And these guys pointed me to American companies, to American insurers actually, where what American insurance companies were doing at the time was they were employing well-being companies to monitor their members' activity effectively, so they could gauge whether their insurance premium should be higher or lower based on how active they were.
Wow.
Very
Yeah.
different model, obviously,
Yeah.
in America to the US because of the private medical scene. And the guys I was working with, the company I was working with, they were like, hey, we'd really love to have a partner in the UK that could do this and do something similar, do mass employee wellness. So basically take wellness out of gyms and bring it into this employee world. And I just thought it was a great idea. I spent a lot of time researching the American model, what they were doing. Nobody was doing it like this in the UK. Again, Fitbit was still very in the early stages, seed capital stages at that sort of point. They were rolling in the US, but weren't where they are now. And there was a few other players in the market, but nobody really there. And I looked at it, I was like, we could make this great. And I positioned it as a business idea. So I put together a business plan, never really written a formalized one before in my life, but wrote it as a business plan, put it all together. I took it to our then CEO and said, hey, look, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move from my job into this job. I'd like you to fund it with, I think it was £40,000. So I could basically build a web application which we brand and we have this data. And I want to basically start this business as a side for what our main business is, which is running gyms. And unfortunately, he couldn't see it. And he just said, no, it won't work. I don't see how this will work. Where are you going to make any money from this? The costs are too high. It's just not going to work. And I think I blamed him for a long time. For a long time, I was like, doesn't know what he's talking about. He's a stupid idiot. And I managed to prevent from swearing there. And I think I did that for a long time. And I came to learn later in years that actually I didn't do a good enough job of selling it to him. And it was on me, not on him. And the next day after I pitched the idea and he said no, I was driving back into the office, driving into work, and I heard the announcement on the radio that Facebook had just been valued at $1 billion. And their entire business was selling data. And I can remember the article, I remember reading it and then listening to it. And it was all about how Facebook's made $1 billion, first company, just from data. And I was like, I don't know how we're going to make money out of this, but I know the amount of health data we will have will be massive. So I just know it will work. So I said to them, I want to do this. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. In which case, do you mind if I leave? I'll hand in my notice, I'll leave, and I want to set this up as a business, and I don't want you to come after me legally. So can we, are you happy with that? And they went, yeah, that's fine, crack on. And that's pretty much what I did, was I left. And I think I stayed there for a month, worked my month's notice, I left, and then the very next day I set up the company and started doing employee wellness programs. I borrowed, I think it was £18,000 from the bank, so I could start building the application. I bought a number of devices, so I had a number of units that I could use, that I could start taking out and start running programs and start getting customers on board. And I got myself a business partner who ran a marketing company, so he ran a marketing agency. So it's like, actually, if he could do a lot of the build, a lot of the marketing, a lot of the design,
Yeah.
I can give him shares, and therefore I don't have to pay for it. So genius idea, poorly executed, as I came to learn, because I didn't put a shareholders agreement in place, and that came back to bite me big style about 2 years later, a year and a half later. And yeah, I got started, and that's what we did. And I think they're here somewhere. So we created.
You've still got them.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah,
Fantastic.
for sure. So we created, basically, these are the devices, and we just clip it onto your shoe. It's called a pebble. Originally, it's called an AxiPad. You just literally clip it onto your laces, and it tracks all of your activity, everything you're doing, the type of movement you're doing, how much energy you put into it, how long, and it just downloads straight onto the computer, as it was back then. And it used to come in these cool little boxes. So basically, just put them into these little boxes, like that. So it's kind of early stages, really.
And a very early Fitbit, essentially.
It is exactly
Yeah.
that. And actually,
Yeah.
it was even earlier than that. So that's in a plastic case. Before that, we put them in cardboard. Couldn't afford plastic, so we literally put them into cardboard. And we ran different programs. We'd come up with different program names to different companies. And that's literally how they came out. Battery, USB, unit,
Yeah.
the structures on the back, and off you go. And yeah, there's a
Wow.
ton of stories off the back of that company, which would take hours in itself. But ultimately, I learned a huge amount. I made every single mistake you can possibly make. I was threatened to be sued by one of the biggest health companies in the world, one of the biggest insurers in the world. I went through this entire journey. I ended up having to borrow more money at different points, borrow money off another bank, borrow money off family, just to kind of keep it afloat. Made every single mistake you can pretty much make. And 2 years later, from startup, it was basically in the gutter, and it was going under. It was definitely on its way out. And I ended up having to format an exit, which was, again, probably one of the worst exits ever seen in business. And that was kind of our first journey.
So how did the shareholder agreement, because I know that, especially for someone that's looking to start a business, that is such an important thing if you're looking to do it with someone else.
Yeah.
How did that come back to bite you?
So I'll try and explain this in the fairest way possible, because you're going to get one side of a story, and there's clearly 3 sides: mine, theirs, and probably somewhere in the middle is closer to the point. So I'll try and be as fair as I can to everybody here. We went into it with aspirations of, this could be huge, and it could have been absolutely massive. If I did this business knowing what I know now back then, it would have been, a monstrous size company. It would have been fantastic, and we certainly would have rivaled Fitbit, I think. So we went into it with the right ideas. We went into it with the right skill sets. We had opposite skill sets of what we were trying to do, and really trying to make it work. And basically, when we got to a point where the company was failing and it wasn't going to succeed, and it became quite apparent that it was going to collapse, I had to navigate the best exit as I could. And at the time, we had probably about £55,000 worth of debt in terms of like loans and stuff like that within the business. And I was trying to grow it to another level, which took more investment. I knew we had to get to that level to really kind of be able to compete. One of the things, because we spoke to investors at the time, and I spoke to somebody who was looking to invest, and one of the bits of advice they gave me, which was really, really sort of stayed with me, and they turned around and said, "Look, we're not going to invest in your company, but I'll tell you where I think you've gone wrong." He goes, "You think you're running a healthcare company, or you think you're running an employee wellness company." And he goes, "You're not. You're running a technology company."
Yeah.
And they're 2 completely different things. They need completely different things. And you're running it like this, and you have to run it like this, and you're just not going to be able to compete. The money you need to save you is not the money you then need to get to the next level. And it's just like, and for that, there's just not enough in it. And he was right. He was absolutely right. It wasn't a wellness company. It was a tech company. And I hadn't spotted that. So anyway, so as we were coming through the exit, I'd been working with a number of different partners. There was a company, a PLC in London, that was buying up small businesses that kind of fitted into their health market, into their wellness market. And they really liked what we had. We did a couple of trials with them. So I spoke to the CEO and I said, hey, look, our company's going under. I can't manage this contract that you want to provide. It's a tiny little contract, but I can't run this program basically because our company's going under. So he was like, that's a real shame. We're sorry to hear it. That's really sad. And so I hung up the phone. And about 20 minutes later, he rang me back and went, hey, look, do you want to sell it to us? Do you want to sign it over to us? I was like, well, what would that look like? Because I was very open. I was like, it's got like 55K, 60K's worth of debt. And he went, if you sign over the shareholder, we'll take over the entire company. We'll buy out the whole company as the shareholder off you, and then we'll take on the debt on the agreement that you come and work with us for the next 2 years and you drive for us our wellness programs and you specialize in the wellness area. And that's how we'd like to do the deal. And we'll buy off you for £1. So it's just, we'll just take it on for £1, buy the shares on we go. I was like, oh my God, that would be amazing. It gets me completely out of the debt. It gets the companies continue going. I get a job. Everyone's kind of win-win, apart from my business partner. So I met with him. I said, hey, look, we're going under, as you know. There's a lifeline here. This is the option. And he went, well, what do I get out of it? And I was like, well, you don't get anything. He was like, well, how much money do I get? And I was like, well, you own 30%. So you get 30%, I guess, of £1. So you get like 30p. But I was like, but look at the other side. He went, yeah, but I don't care about that. What I want to know is how much I'm going to get. And I was like, there's nothing. If we don't do this, the business goes under. And I'm landed with 60 grand's worth of debt. It was all director guaranteed. So it was all guaranteed against myself as a director. And he turned around. I'll never forget this. And he turned around and said, I'd rather see you landed with the debt than to sell it for £1.
Wow.
And that was the very last conversation we ever had. So that was the last conversation we had. There was a buyer solicitors basically. And because I didn't have a shareholders agreement in place, and because I'd given him, I think, probably too much equity. I think the equity was fair, but what I had done is given him enough equity that he could block the sale. So he had about 30%, so he could block the sale. So there was nothing I could do. And then he had his solicitors basically, just block the sale. And that just then tanked the entire deal. So that meant that I ended up with a failing company, 65K's worth of debt, then very, very quickly turned into just under, there was about 80K in the end by the time all the interest being added, all the court orders, bailiffs banging on the door. By the time all the fees, all the costs, all the interest, and actually it got stabilized properly, it was about just under £82,000 worth of debt that I had labeled to me. So yeah, it was a chunk. And I think I was 29, 30.
That is an incredible story regarding the power of a shareholders agreement, right? And
yeah, absolutely. And people said to me as well, like, again, I'm older now, so I'm slightly wiser. But back then, I was just like, no, I'm just going to do it this way because it'd be fine, it'd be fine, it'd be fine. And I can remember, mentors and people I trusted and people I spoke to and people that had done well in business saying to me, put a shareholders agreement in place. They were like, business is like a marriage. Where it goes well, it's great. When it goes wrong and you divorce, it's horrendous. Get the legals in place. The accountants had said it. Everyone had said it, and I didn't do it. And yeah, it absolutely bit me. So it doesn't matter how close you are, how connected you are, put it in place because
do it properly.
It's for the exit.
So, Joel, how do you go from, obviously you've lost the company, like you said, you've got this horrendous debt that's come about as a result of it. Do you go into a role or do you set up another business? How do you take yourself out of this situation?
So I had to do a lot of damage limitation. It was, as I said, at the time I had bailiffs banging on the door. We had a small child, had 2 small children, couldn't afford to pay for food. It was awful. I can remember some of the most awful times of going shopping and not being able to pay for food. We were really kind of like, everything was about to collapse. Bankruptcy was definitely being spoken about. And I was just like, I just need to salvage this to be able to breathe, to do something else. I know I can do it, but I just need to do something else. So I spoke to the CEO back in the healthcare company. I said, look, clearly we're not going to be able to do this deal. Is there an option for a job? And he said, there's no job for you unless we have, the business, because that's where you're going to bring in. He said, well, we'll buy the assets off you. So we'll do an asset transfer. So what we'll do is we could purchase assets because as a director of the company, I was still allowed to sell the assets. So then we valued up the assets, which came to about £11,000. And they paid I think they ended up paying about 7 or 8 grand basically. And that agreement was that they would buy the assets and, which they did. That would go over to their business, leaving this empty shell with nothing left under this debt. And I could then begin the wind up process. And as part of that, I then agreed to go and work for them on a permanent contract, and off we went. I did another bad deal through that process. So when I spoke to the owners, the CEO, and I was like, "Hey, look, I can do it, but I'm still going to be like 65, 70 grand in the red effectively. I'm still in real trouble." And he turned around to me and said, "Don't worry about that. Work for us for a year, and we'll sort it out for you." So I was like, "Okay, cool." And of course, when that year came, and I sat with him, I was like, "Hey, do you remember we spoke about that?" And he went, "Have you got that in writing?" And I was like, "No." And he went, "Nothing I can do." And I was like, "Cool, lesson learned." Get things in writing. So anyway, so I went to work with them, and that was fine. And I was based up in London for 4 days, lived in Somerset, so I was traveling up to London, working in London. I worked for them basically 40 hours a week, but probably do it closer to 60. And it paid enough of a salary that I could pay our mortgage, I could put food on the table, and I could start paying back the debt. So I managed to freeze all of the debt, get a cat, and I was just paying it back here. I was paying it back initially like £1 a month. And then eventually, I was able to pay it more. And again, I can remember, there was so many lessons learned at that time. I remember speaking to the guys at Lloyd's, and we owed them about 24 grand, I think we owed Lloyd's. And I remember speaking to the debt collection guys and saying, "Look, this is crazy. You should wipe off this debt." And they went, "Why would we do that?" And I went, "Because I have no money. Like, nothing's going to happen. My life's like a mess. I can pay it back £1 a month at this rate. It's going to take like 340 years or something, 346 years to pay back. That's crazy. Like, why would you do that? Why would you just wipe it out?" And he went, "You can only pay and this is with the young guys, right? He was like, "You can only pay £1 at the moment, but you might be able to pay more in the future." And I was like, "Bastards." He's got me. And
Playing the long game.
I paid off. Yeah, I played the long game. But obviously the interest had frozen. So that's what I did. And I went to work with those guys, and I worked with them for a year, got past my non-compete. And after the end of the year, then I was free to start looking at other opportunities. So I continued to work with them still for a number of years after that. But outside is like side projects, side hustles, as they sometimes obviously get called. I started work on loads of different businesses. And I think at the time I was working on 5 different business ideas, and really just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what was going to stick. And that's what it was. And the prisons was one of those 5. And I was literally just gauging what's going to stick the most. And the prisons did. And what I ended up doing was
Why prisons is quite a unique area to focus on.
Yeah.
Why?
Why prisons?
Yeah.
I came up with the idea, and again, I've told this story about it a number of times, but I came up with the idea in 2009. So my wife worked in a prison. She's a clinical psychologist. So she was working in a prison doing treatment programs for sex offenders, so victim empathy and enhanced thinking skills, stuff like that, basically. So rehabilitation programs. And they used to do this a working prison, still have prisons in, very much working prison in Somerset and Shepton Mallet prison. And they used to do tours every couple of months. They would do small group of tours, like 12 people on them. And they would take in new prison officers, probation workers, people going into youth offending, solicitors, barristers, anybody who was going to work with offenders. They would take them around the prison and show them what prisons look like and how they operate to give them a better understanding of the people they're going to be working with. And she came in one day and she said, "Hey, look, there's a space on the back of this tour. Do you want to come in and see where I work, see the prison?" I was like, "Yeah, cool. Sounds like a good evening. Let's do that. Let's go to prison." So I did, and I jumped on the back of this tour, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. I was blown away by like the information, the history, everything. Again, it wasn't that much about actual like how the prison ran then. It was more about the history of it, what had happened over the years. They had a small museum section there as well. So really interested to see all of that. And I walked out of the tour and I went, God, that would make a great tourist attraction if you could just get rid of the prisoners. If it was empty, what an amazing tourist attraction it would be. And who better to run tours than prison officers? They had done this job for years. So that was 2009, I think. And I just put that's kind of the back of my head. went about with my normal world. And then 2013, the MOJ announced that they were closing 7 prisons across the country, one of which was Shepton, and my non-compete was coming up, and I thought, do you know what? Let's try and buy a prison, and that's kind of how it began. And I had to go through a very different journey then of what that was going to look like. So yeah, and that's literally how it came about. It was a very entrepreneurial kind of journey of going, hey, that looks like a great opportunity. That I think that would be amazing. Yeah, let's do that.
Sounds absolutely amazing. And I think the first question that comes to my head is, how do you finance buying a prison? Because it sounds like an expensive thing, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So I like to think I positively disrupt. I think people that know me and work with me, and probably people that do business with me, would say I just disrupt. But I like to think it's positively done. So the process for buying a prison was the MOJ outsourced it to an agent, as you'd expect. In this instance, it was Jones Lang LaSalle, so JLL, big commercial agent. And they basically put together a pack to say, hey, this is what you could use the prison for. Anyone can apply, but you have to be vetted. So I applied and said, look, I'm really interested in buying the prison. I'm interested in it as a property development. We kind of dabble in property development a little bit. I'm also interested in whether there could be like some program running from there. So I'd like to have a look at it. So I managed to just get over the threshold. They sent me a pack, which was very much, it's going to be housing. Like, that's all you can do. And basically, I went and had a look at it with the agent. So I went and had a look around. Emma, my wife, came with me. And we're like, okay, cool. And they gave us a sheet. They said, right, fill this in. This is your bid sheet, basically, and send it in to us. And it was literally, the name of your organization, what you wanted to do with the prisons, what your plans were, how much you were prepared to bid, and how you were going to finance it. And I was like, right, I've got no idea what this is going to look like. So I came at it from a completely different approach, and I found out later on that literally every other person that bid on it, there was 5 of us. They literally just filled in that one sheet and sent it in, and I created a 78-page business plan, which I still have, which was how I was going to run this business. I basically started by going, we're not going to develop a property, we're going to run it as a heritage-led attraction. I built this entire business plan, all the finances, as if I was pitching it to an investor. And I put together a cover letter, and then I filled in the front sheet, and I basically said, I'm going to pay £1 for it because I think there's more liability than asset here, and we're going to have to build all this. But what we're going to do is going to be better for everybody, because what the MOJ and pretty much every government department says is, we will do what's best value for the taxpayer, because technically the building belongs to the taxpayer. So we'll do whatever's best for the taxpayer. Which isn't true. And I can prove that as we go through the conversation. But yeah, so that was kind of it. So I put the bid in, and I was pretty sneaky about the way I went about it. I would say sneaky. I took a different approach. As a registered bidder, I had access to the building, and I had access to certain information, and I just put it out there. So I literally kind of always WikiLeaked it. Whereas I went out and I said, right, if we take over, we're going to make a bid for the prison. This is what we're going to do with it. I created a website just off Wix. I created a social media account, a Facebook account. I just put it out there and said, hey, look, we want to buy the prison. This is what we're going to do with it. And at every stage through the journey, it's a very laborious process. Every time I had an update from the estate agents from JLL, I'd publish it. And they'd give me an update, and I would publish it. And then they got really angry. So like, every time we give you an information, an update, you publish it and you let it go out. I was like, yeah, of course, because I want people to know what's going on. Hey, you should back our bid. So that upset them quite a lot. And we just went through the process, and we got down to the final 3. And then unfortunately, we weren't successful in buying it. It got sold to a property developer. And the way the process worked was they informed us in December 2014 that we hadn't been successful in purchasing it, but they weren't going to announce who had got it. I knew another bidder, so I spoke to them. They were like, no, we didn't get it. I was like, no, we didn't get it either. So I knew somebody was buying it, but they weren't going to announce it till like 2015, so January, February type of stuff. So I was like, I just didn't want to let it go. I was like, I'm sure there's something to do here. I'm sure we can make it work. So I drew up a list of property developers in the UK that I thought would be able to do it. They could potentially make it work and were of a size that would do it. And on that list was the Osborne Group, which was a company that bought Oxford Prison, turned it into their hotel, Malmaison. So they developed Oxford Prison Hotel. And I dropped them an email, cold email to all of these companies, including the company that bought it, but I didn't know that at that point. And I said, hey, look, I think you might have bought Shepton Mallet Prison. I was also bidding for it, and I wanted to open it as a tourist attraction, as a heritage-led tourism attraction. And I wonder if we can have a conversation about what your plans are for it, and maybe whether there could be an interim where we operate, a tourist attraction. And still, I was working for the other company, been working for them for maybe, I'm not sure, just over a year, because literally my non-compete had ended, and the next day I put the bid in for the prison. So I've been working for them for a while, and and I got to a point where I was like, I was still working, but I had this time. I was like, I'd probably do both at the same time. And I put this email over to him, and this guy, Trevor Osborne, who owned the company, the owner and CEO, sent me an email back and said, hey, I haven't bought Shepton Mallet Prison, but I have bought Shrewsbury Prison in Shropshire. Do you want to come and meet with me and have a discussion about that prison? And that's how it started. And I met with him, and we had a chat about Shrewsbury. And he went, so what's this all about? And I said, well, I want to turn it into a tourist attraction. He went, what, how, what, why? And this is an incredibly entrepreneurial guy in himself. Done very, very well. Lot of property development behind them. Really big size company. Met with him. He was very, he gave me a number of different bits of advice, but he just couldn't see it. He just couldn't see it working. And he said, look, come up in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be up there. Come and have a look at Shrewsbury, see what you think. So I borrowed some money to drive up to Shrewsbury, drove to Shrewsbury, met with him here. He said, go have a wander around. It's empty. Just go have a look around, and we'll meet up in half an hour, 40 minutes, whatever. So I did that, and I came back. He said, so what do you think? And I went, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I'd love to take it on and run it as a tourist attraction. I think it'd be brilliant. No idea what I was doing. And he turned around and went, okay, great, let's do that then. He goes, I'm not going to use it for a year. It's empty for a year whilst I get my planning on it. Once I've got planning, I'll start the development. So if you want it for 12 months, it's yours. I was like, okay, let's do that. And he went, come see me in a few weeks. We'll work out some rent agreements. We'll figure out what you're going to pay us and how that's all going to work. But, in the meantime, just get started. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll kind of get started. And 2 weeks, I think it was 2 weeks later. So that was like in the June, maybe late June. 2 weeks later, he said, oh, I've got my my estates manager's up there. He's got a set of keys for you. Go on up, get a set of keys, and then you can get started. I was like, I haven't got a lease in place or rent agreements. He went, we'll worry about that down the line. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So I drove up, and I turned up at the front door of a prison, massive gates, and there was this guy stood there, and he went, are you Joel? And I went, yeah. And he went, here's the keys. I was like, okay. And he went, have you been here before? And I went, yeah, once. He went, okay, cool. So you know what it is? That's the key for the front door. That's all you need to know. Any problems, give me a ring, but I'm going on holiday tomorrow for 2 weeks. So give me a call when I get back 2 weeks. And he just left. And I was like, what? Like, I've got keys to the prison, nothing in place whatsoever, no agreements, nothing at all. And it was so bizarre. And I think that was the beauty of working with Trevor. He was such an entrepreneur in himself. He just was like, yeah, just go make it happen. Like, and he just said to me, don't damage the building. Like, just look after it.
Did you, because obviously going back to your previous encounters with not getting things written down and having been burnt on a couple of occasions already by that point, were you not thinking, hang on a minute, this guy's giving me a prison, giving me the keys, we've got nothing written down. Am I going to be making the same mistake again?
Do you know what? I didn't, because at that point we still had like £65,000 worth of debt. I was paying it back at like £1 a month. I was like, what's the worst that can happen here? Like, literally what? I end up in prison. Like, is that the worst that's going to happen?
Just hopefully Shrewsbury.
I was so deep in this hole. And I was like, I think when you reach the bottom of the hole, and then you discover that like hell has a basement, and you got a little bit lower, and you're like, there can't be any more levels below this. There just can't. So, and it was just blind faith that I could make it work. And all I felt I needed was that opportunity. I really just, and I think a lot of people feel like that. They just had the opportunity. And that is what most people need. But I also think there is some guidance and some steering to avoid a lot of the mistakes I've had. And actually, I kind of felt like he was taking all the risk because he'd just given me these keys and like, off you go. And there were moments, real moments. And Trevor's he truly is a great entrepreneur and a great businessman. And I'm very, very fortunate to have met him and to be able to learn stuff from him. And I remember meeting with him, we were talking about the rent, and I put together like how much I thought like the business was going to do and what I thought we could pay in rent. And I put together a figure basically of £1,000 a month in rent. And he sat on the other side of the table and read it. So I've read your proposal. I think that's absolutely fine. And I was like, brilliant. Whew, great. Because I had no idea how much rent would be for a prison. No idea. It's 4 acres, a lot of real estate. No idea. And he went, yeah, I'm quite happy with £12,000 a month. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, I'm happy with your proposal of £12,000 a month. I went, no, that's £12,000 a month for the year. It was like £1,000 a month. And he went, oh, well, I'm not sure we can make that work. And again, I just, we spoke about it and he said, well, I can't let you have it for £1,000 a month. It's too cheap. It's too much real estate, basically. And we just had a conversation. He said, look, be honest with me. Show me a business plan. Don't give me a cooked book of figures. Give me the real figures. I will work through this with you. So I did. And he said, well, I think you can afford to pay £2,500 a month based on your figures. And he says, and I can see you've got a limit of what you think you'll do, i.e. your ceiling. So let's take that as the ceiling. And everything you earn above that, you give us 30%. And I was like, sure, I think that's fair because I didn't think we'd get above it. And I could afford £2,500 a month on the basis of what the figures looked like. So I was like, okay. And he worked through and he really sort of helped construct the deal that was fair for both parties. And that's what we did. And then we put a license in place. It was a bit more comfortable with a lease for everybody. It didn't give me all the repairs and maintenance quite in the same way. It didn't, I had to cover the insurance in the same way. And yeah, they were pretty flexible and they were really, really good in that journey. And I know I spoke to his MD, a while later, and his MD said that, they really try and break the mold of how developers work. And they try and break down that thought process of what you think property developers are and that expectation. And they do. And they were super supportive the whole way through for years. Even when we bought the building off them, they really did bend over backwards to accommodate us. And I think it was a pretty solid relationship. A couple of hairy points and a couple of, tense moments, but generally it was really good. And we worked very, very well with them. I was very fortunate that they operate like an entrepreneurial business.
I mean, that whole period is just testament to not giving up, the passion, the drive. I mean, to write, like you said, from the beginning, a 72-page business plan when everyone else is putting in a 1-page. I mean, I wanted to get your opinion on, business plans, I think often get a bit of a hard time. And, they're often, a lot of gurus say you don't need a business plan, you just go and do it. Don't worry about planning this. What's your feeling on that side of things? Obviously, you talked about it a few times about putting a business plan together and then going in and acting.
I think business plans are required when you very first start if you need to borrow money. I'm not a massive fan of business plans. I'm certainly not big, heavy duty business plans. I think there's merit and definite advantages in somebody being able to detail their vision and what they're trying to achieve, and then be able to break down the steps to create goals and to create like almost milestones of where they'd like to try and get to, and accept that they're probably going to miss them. But I'm not a massive fan of business plans because I think that you write them and they're done and everyone goes, that's brilliant, great. And it kind of sits on the shelf and never gets touched. And the reality is you can't plan in that way. You have to be, I think, fluid and mobile and have more flexibility than a business plan provides. I think they're good for banks. They're good for lenders because they allow you to tick a box and say, yeah, they've got a plan in place and off they go. My experience has been I've got to a stage now where I don't have to business plan in quite the same way. And I think I have to produce more financials than theoretics. So when I first started with the very first business, I had to put together a business plan to show the bank what I was going to do with their money. When I just bought Shepton Mallet Prisons, we just bought about recently, a few weeks ago. And when I met with the lenders, I said to them early doors, like the first meeting about buying Shepton, we already purchased another building with them, so we're already working with them anyway. So when I purchased this, we had a discussion about it. I'm just going to be clear with you guys, I'm not doing a business plan. Like I'm not writing one. We'll do the financials that you need. That's absolutely fine. But I'm not writing a plan. I'll tell you what I'm going to do with the building, and you take all the notes you like and what my vision for it is, but I'm not writing a business plan. And they were a bit like, oh, we might need one. If you need my business plan, you can look at the last 10 years of what we've done and what we've achieved. And I'm just not writing one. I hope no one gets in trouble for this. And they went, okay. And I went, all right, and they kind of just went, that's just Joel. Like, that's just the way he is. And I wasn't going to budge on it. And I was like, I'm just not doing it. It's a waste of time for everybody. Waste of my time to write it. Waste of your time to read it, because I guarantee it'll sit there and we'll probably do something different. And we have already moved to do something slightly different with that property because of something else that's happened locally. So it's already adapted quite quickly. So yeah, like I say, I think that when we look at businesses we're going to invest in, I invest on a gut feeling. I think when we look at businesses that I want to work with, I look more at the founders, the vision, the mindset, what they're doing, and where they are in their journey than I am about the business plan, because that will form as it goes. And that's why I don't want to call it an incubation hub, because I don't like this idea of incubating ideas, like sitting on them for ages and trying to make everything perfect. I'd rather just get going. I'd rather just start and figure out as we go.
Fail fast, isn't it, essentially?
Fail fast, fail hard. Yeah, absolutely. But I think once you've learned those lessons, no business is going to kind of run exactly as it did before. If you try to start McDonald's now, you're not going to have the same journey they had. And you're going to have to navigate a different path to get to the same end goal, potentially. So yeah, I'm not a massive fan of them personally, but I get why they're needed.
I'm very similar to you. Like, we've written many business plans and then we've put them in a drawer, and then we've, once you've got some funding, you barely look at it again. We've started doing more annual kind of plans where we take a review of the business and then just put that kind of plan in place for the next 12 months. And that's proved kind of helpful, but like everything, it's not a full 72-page, 80-page, 90-page business plan. It's more of a 3 or 4 page document of what you're actually going to do, the actions.
Yeah.
And I think
that's it. Yeah. Three pages, probably done and dusted, and off you go. You can get into 3 pages what you can get into 72.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about the things that now go on at these prisons. So you've got escape rooms, you've got evenings behind bars, you've got prison escapes, you've got zombie experiences.
Yeah.
Like, how awesome are all these things?
Yeah, it's a pretty bizarre world. It's really cool. I mean, again, I tend to work with 3s, 5s, and 7s. So we sort of split the attractions into 3 areas. We reference it as tours, activities, and events. So our tours are very much everything that's heritage based. So that's your guided tours, your self-guided tours, your ghost tours, learning about the history of the prison and what went on, all the way back from when it first started to when it closed in 2013. We do that with all 3 of them. They're all slightly different because they all have slightly different histories and reasons for being. Then we have our activity world, which is things like escape rooms. We have axe throwing, for example, at one. We have another activity called turf wars at another. I think we're going to put some crazy golfing up at Peterhead and stuff like that. Things that you can do elsewhere, but we have the space because we've got a lot of rooms in the prisons. So we've got a lot of rooms. It's just most of them are like 6 by 10 or 8 by 10. So we put stuff in there that fits, and then we theme it to the prisons. Escape rooms in a jail, it just makes sense, right? Like, it's perfectly built space. It's the exact right size, and you can't get out of it. Like
it was exactly what it was built for, to avoid.
Yeah, so we just put the puzzles in, the fun around it, really. So that's kind of the activity side. And then we have the events. So the events are everything that's bigger and longer and naturally more expensive. So we have a night behind bars where you stay overnight. And it's, it's the most events. You're going to stay in a prison cell and you're going to sleep on a prison bed and you're going to sleep on a prison mattress. And it's not going to stay at a nice, comfortable hotel. It's not glitz and glamour. It's hard. It's spit and sawdust to a degree, but it's an experience. So people do it once. Some people do it lots of times, but most people do it once. You go, okay, cool. And it's hardy. There aren't showers in the morning and stuff like that. There's toilets in the cells and sinks in the cells. You're in prison, for Christ's sake. So that's kind of night behind bars. We do Prison Break, which is a big 2.5-hour escape game. So it's not an escape room. It's a full escape game where you're trying to break out of the jail. So we do that. So those are a couple of events we run in-house. We do our own ghost hunting events where you come in and literally explore the jail looking for ghosts. So our team leaders, our paranormal team leaders will take you through actually looking for ghosts using, I guess say scientific methods, but somebody will probably shoot us down in the comments about that. But actual methods for looking for ghosts. And then we have lots of external companies that hire it as well. So we have tattoo conventions, we have book conventions, we have car conventions, we have, I'm trying to think what else we have. We have other companies will come and run similar events to us. We'll have loads of productions come and film in there. So that whole sort of different world. And then we have our education programs that we run for schools, colleges, universities for key stages, which all align with the curriculum. So our education behind bars programs, which again runs at all of the prisons. We have team building and corporate events. So everything from just fun and reward where they come into escape rooms all the way through to facilitator-led sessions around time management or enhancing your business or financial planning, business planning, whatever it might be, whether we deliver that or we bring the external facilitator, and obviously we provide the rooms and all the food and everything around it. So so that's kind of what we do across the board for all of the jails. They all operate slightly differently, but fundamentally they had that same kind of foundation, and then that allows them to then start, really leaning into what's specialized for them and for their area. And that's what the development plans now look like.
I love the ecosystem because you've got, like you say, from the schools coming in the week to the education to the weekend tourism to the, it all works together, doesn't it? Like you say, you've got the grounds. If you can get the golf in there as well, you get people coming regularly. They could be coming every 2 or 3 months to do the different activities. You're basically an activity centre within a prison.
Yeah, I mean, we always refer to it as heritage-led tourism, but we're a tourism attraction. We're definitely an attraction, and that's how we try and think of it. And again, we've gone through lots of different, and I've certainly gone through lots of different phases of changing how I look at it. And, we've had a lot of staff leave over the past years because of when it's changed and when it adapts and when it moves, they struggle with that. So people do go because, no, that's not how it should be. Or that's not how it was. You're changing. It's like, because we need to evolve. And, there's lots of people I look at and I sort of take snippets from everybody. But, I think Steve Jobs made a really sound position with Apple when he was like, we try and run Apple like a startup. We want to be able to move very, very quickly with the market. And that's very difficult for a monstrous company. So I try and run all of our businesses still like a startup. I try and keep them quite lean, and I try and allow us to flex with what's happening. COVID's a great example of that. We came out of COVID, and on the way out of COVID, I was like, we need to change our business model so we don't just rely on consumers, visitors, like that general public coming to buy tickets to the attraction. We need to change where 90% of market. So we were at 90-10, where 90% of our revenue was generated by people buying tickets for the attraction, and 10% was generated by educations, groups, businesses, the rest of the stuff. And I was like, we need to get this closer to a 50-50 or a 60-40 model if we're going to make it and survive. So, we spent a year and a half, and I spent a year and a half really drilling the team and readjusting the team from marketing through to sales, through to finance, of how we're going to make that shift and spend a bit more time on these other areas. And then that's what we did. And because of that, different people left. I'm like, well, that's not what we do. We do, we're just an attraction that brings guests. It's like, no, we're going to start doing this. So we did that. And I think that one of the big changes for me was when we purchased the building. So, we went through a huge journey. I recorded it for about 2.5 years, the journey of buying the building. huge roller coaster. It's on my YouTube channel where I had to put it into 4 parts because it's so bloody long. And when I bought the building, there was that whole kind of wow, we own this. Oh my God, this is amazing type of stuff. And then I kind of was looking at it, and again, I spoke to Trevor, who I bought the building off, and I spoke to some other property owners, and we were just discussing things. They were like, "So how are you going to use every square foot?" I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Well, you're a building owner now, so you think of yourself as a landlord rather than as a tenant. Your job is to maximize the 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 income, effectively the profit from your building, and the way you do that is you maximize every square foot. No square foot goes untapped." And I was like, Jesus, never thought of it like that. And I was like, how am I going to use every square foot? So the first thing was figuring out how many square feet there are. And then obviously what we have is, like I say, we've got 178 cells pretty much at each jail. They've all kind of a sort of similar number. Peter had slightly bigger, but 178, you got 178 rooms, which are 6 by 10 or 8 by 10 in rows of 20 and 30, 4 stories high. What the hell do you do with these things? So, but I had to kind of go, well, hold on, we need to think about utilizing every square foot. And how are we going to do that? So that changed the way I thought about the prisons. And I have to jump sometimes between being a property owner and a property developer with the landlord head on. And I have to sort of then parachute in and think of it from a tenant with a rental agreement, kind of what we do. The beauty is, because we're through the whole infrastructure, the whole ecosystem, we don't have to turn around to the tenant and go, hey, have you thought about doing this? And the tenant doesn't turn around and go, hey, fix our heating right now. So that actually works. I think our relationship's pretty easy because it's me having a chat with me. Though generally it goes okay.
Few arguments.
Yeah. Sometimes there's a few debates. Yeah. I don't have to write anything down. Let's put it that way. And yeah. So that was just, again, it's just the perspective of how you think about it. I think I guess to round that one off, when you look at businesses, and I was with a business yesterday that is for sale, we were looking at whether it's something would fit for us as a purchase. Something I'm really keen on is buying businesses and growing into the next level. There was the employees, and the thing is that when you work for somebody, you see your bit, you see your job. And that's generally kind of all that people see, is just their bit. They don't see what's going on elsewhere. The further up you move in the ladder, in the corporate ladder, the wider you see it. The people at the top see everything. But because you're seeing everything, you don't see the detail of what's going on the floor. And that's one of the real challenges is, decisions sometimes get made where they don't think about the impact of the person that's got to deliver it in the car park on the ground level, or the cleaner that's got to deliver it, or the person on the front desk that's got to speak to the customers. So trying to keep that connectivity, but then the team on the ground don't recognize why we're doing certain things because of that bigger picture, that bigger ecosystem. And, once you start running multiple businesses or multiple attractions, that becomes even greater because you've got people in the same job at different locations that see their bit, and they don't understand why we're changing a booking system to a new booking system that they feel is more complicated, because they don't see that it's going to allow us to encompass all of the attractions, which means we have all of our customer data in one place, which is better for us, better for the customer, and better for the future of the business. They're just thinking about, but I know how to operate this system and I don't want to learn this new one. So, there's all those journeys to go through, but also understanding from the top, what is that actual impact? Is it going to be problematic for them? So,
And I think
how
that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, for any business, isn't it? It's bringing people with them. You have to sell that story, the reason why behind it, and also building into that culture of change is one of the hardest things, I think, to bring, especially if you're acquiring a business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the culture within a business is probably the hardest nut to crack. And I would give it, I don't know, I like to think we're good at it. And, I really shoot from the hip, and I'm very honest and open with people. I tell them as it is. And, I get in a lot of trouble all the time because I just say it. When I had a conversation with somebody the other day with one of our managers, and they were struggling with something, and they were like, I just feel like, it's all my fault, and I feel like I'm getting everything wrong, and I don't feel like I'm doing a particularly good job. I'm like, you know what? You're not doing a particularly good job, and you are getting a lot of things wrong. And they were like, what? Can you? And people are there like, can you say that? And I'm like, of course I can say that. It's true. I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it and say you're doing an amazing job, because you're not. You're not doing a very good job. And then I broke down the reasons where I thought they weren't doing a good job. And I was like, some of that's not even your fault. Like, it is your fault, but it's not your fault. It's their fault, because what was happening was, it's a very specific instance. They couldn't do the job that they were doing. They're not trained to do the job that part of the job that they were doing. I was like, so I have no expectation of you to do that job. Like, I don't think that you're going to do that, because you don't know how to do that. What I do expect you to do, however, is go, hey, I'm struggling over here. I don't know how to do this. Because I don't see that necessarily, because I'm seeing so many other things. I don't see that. So unless you say, I used to be a lifeguard, and it is true, unless you go, hey, I'm drowning, I might not see you're drowning. And do you know what's going to happen? You're going to drown. And when you go underwater, I'm not going to notice until you're on the bottom and the alarm goes off. So I was like, so sometimes you have to shout, and then we can help. And I was like, so you are at fault and you aren't doing a great job because you're not telling us you're struggling and you don't know how to do this. So I was like, you have responsibility in this as well as we have responsibility in this. We can't always be expected to see everything.
And I really like that analogy as well, because that is so true. Like you say, you can't know what's going on with each individual person as well.
No,
But when you're at the top, that's the hardest part. This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. So you've got, we started this podcast, you've got 3 pillars, you've got so many things going on within each pillar. Let's talk a little bit about the future of the Cove Group. Obviously, you've got a lot going on at the moment, but where do you see yourself, say, in 3 years' time?
We could be out of business tomorrow. It's always the reality, isn't it? I always look at Blockbuster and Woolworths, like, we'll be out of business tomorrow. Do you know what? I'm not 100% sure, and I think that's probably where I haven't got a business plan. Is what I would like to see is a larger ecosystem, so a larger version of what we're doing. And what I've done is, the way that I've structured it is, I've put in place teams in different areas and different departments that allows that growth to happen and facilitate that. So I'd love us to take on more attractions. I'd love us to grow the attraction world, because I think that we're really good at it. We understand it. It's an industry we know. It's a world we know. We've got all the systems, processes, everything in place. And we've got a centralized team that spend probably 90% of their time in there. So for us to scale and continue to grow that is quite a simple model. So I'd like to see us do that. And that's something I'm certainly looking at when I'm not thinking of starting a new attraction, but I am certainly looking at buying existing attractions and how they fold into that ecosystem. That being said, I certainly would, take on like Reading Jail. I certainly would take on the castle here and a few other bits and pieces there that we've looked at. So yeah, definitely would. So I think there's that. I'd love to have more time in my life to be able to concentrate on the startups. And what I've learned about startups now is kind of where to put the people and where the pressure points will be. So getting those moving and getting startups going another way, which will be over here, but then we'll shift over into our own business infrastructure. So I'd like to do that. And I'd like to work more with other companies that in that startup phase that want that level of support and partners around that, of which I think there's loads of them. And we have our model of how I want to do that, which is different to others. So those are where I'd like to be. And I think that where I'd want to end up in 3 years is, I certainly want to be in a position where I can pick and choose how my day looks. And I'm getting closer to it. Each day I get a little closer to it, but I want to be able to pick and choose what my day looks like, because I think that will facilitate a larger growth for the business and will only benefit that. I'd certainly like to see us stable, really, really stable. And I don't know if that's ever true of any business, where you just don't have to worry about how you're going to pay the bills. Because I don't know if that exists for any business, even the biggest companies in the world. So I'd like to sort of see that. And I'd like to see us really kind of finish a lot of the things that we start. So the trouble with being entrepreneurial led And the trouble with me at the helm of that is I'm really good at starting things. I'm great at the really high level, seeing, big vision. I struggle to think small. So I think, huge vision all the time. And I'm really good, like in the detail level, like super, super detailed. I'm great at those two things. Everything in the middle, I'm a shit up. So what naturally happens, the way that I've structured things is through what I call vision, innovation, and execution. So I do most of the vision, and that's great. I'll do a chunk of innovation, but we've got some great people that do that. And it's getting the execution done, it's getting it finished. That last 10% is always the hardest, and that's like in everything you do. Just think about like running a marathon. Everyone will tell you that last 10%, that
Even
last
painting a room, right?
that last thing for
Yeah.
anybody is just, oh man. And then when you do it, it's so anti-bloody climatic. Like, don't want to do the
Yeah.
next one. So I think what I've have started doing and building is people that are really good at that last 10%. Because I know I'm awful at it. Nothing gets finished in my life. So getting people that can do that last 10% is really important for us as a business. We get that nailed, I'll get things started, other people innovate in the middle, and then there's people to get over the line. And I'd like to see us do that. I'd like to see us get things finished. And I'd like to see our attractions become really world renowned. And I'd like to see us start in other areas as well. I'd like to get the hotels up and built. It's going to take a couple of years. And I've got a model for our hotels. And I think our funding model is really interesting and really different. And I think I'd like that to be more. I think I'd like Cove Group to be more connected to people, just people generally, than anything else. And then every now and again, I make these crazy kind of calls. Go, oh, maybe I'll just run for prime minister at some point. Maybe I'll just become PM. And my family and my stepdad goes, you can't just do that. I'm like, of course you can. It's like, you can't just run for PM. It's not America. I'm like, yeah, it'd be fine. Get 50% of the vote. Anyone will take you.
Yeah. They'll find a way. He'll find a way.
Yeah,
Jonathan.
yeah. I mean, it all sounds very crazy and like, what the hell? But as I said to him when he was telling me all the reasons I couldn't do it and all the reasons why that's not possible. And to an entrepreneur, that's just a dream. I'm just like, cool, you're just telling me all the reasons why I should do this. And I just said around to him afterwards, I said, if you have 50% of the whole vote, you're going to get elected. And he went, yeah, if you've got 50% of the whole vote, then it's easy. And I was like, cool, then that's how I'll do it. I'll get 50% of the whole vote and then I'll do it. And then any party will take me. Yeah, but the challenging part is getting 50% of the vote. I'm like, yeah, I'll worry about that down the line. I'll worry about that when it comes.
Work it out.
Exactly. I'll work that out as I go.
And I think there's someone very famous in America, unfortunately, who's definitely done that and has found a way to.
System. Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't want to put myself in the same bucket as Donald Trump.
That's the trouble, isn't it? Now what's been seen as an amazing achievement to come back as also he's doing some pretty big things, right? But anyway, let's not go into that. Joel, it's been fantastic having you. If we could just ask you one last question, it's what advice would you give someone who's looking to start a new business?
I would say it's going to give you the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. It's going to take all the energy you have and then more than you even think you're going to be able to give it. It is going to be one hell of a journey, and at points you'll think, why? And at other points you'll be, this is amazing, the best thing ever. And I think I always refer back to Nike, and I'm like, you just have to Nike it. You just have to just do it. And that's it. I would just do it. I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't worry. There'll be loads of time for that. Just do it. What's the worst that can happen? Like,
it's great advice. And it's a great book as well. Is it Shoe Dog? I think is by the owner of Nike.
How is it? I haven't read it. I haven't read it.
Definitely read it. And it's very, very, very powerful story of just literally what their slogan is.
Just do it. I love Nike. I love brands. I do. And I think that, I live by that. With Nike, I do always design my own shoes. I love going onto their website and designing my own trainers. I'm just like, these are cool. And I always make sure it says, just do it on there somewhere. just do it. Yeah.
So Joel, how can people find more about you and obviously the businesses that you've got as well?
Oh, they don't want to do that. They got more important things in their lives to do. I didn't do that. We're actually, that was the meeting I had this morning. We're building our websites because our Cove Group website has been up for a few years. I built it on Wix one evening when I just had a spare 20 minutes. Like, right, I need to put a website on because someone's searching it, so I need to do it. So it looks awful. It looks horrendous. So we're rebuilding Cove Group at the moment. So you can see it's at covegroup.co.uk, but I wouldn't because it looks awful. The prisons, if you just search, prison tourist attractions, we're going to come up. Or Shrewsbury, Shepton Mallet, Peterhead, all those kind of things. If you look for me, then I'm in Joel Seb Campbell, so Joel SEB, so Seb Campbell across all the social media platforms. Or if you just type in hashtag Entrepreneur Life, I'll pop up. And that's probably the easiest way to see what I'm doing is I just, throughout social media, I love doing that. So yeah, those are probably the easiest ways. I always sort of say to people, encourage them, you're very welcome to send me a message, connect with me, send me a comment, anything like that. I spend so much time on social media answering stuff like that and connecting with people. That's probably the easiest way to get hold of me. But yeah, business-wise, head to one of the websites.
Joel, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really, really fantastic story. And the ups and downs and the resilience you've shown is phenomenal. So thank you for coming on. So guys, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you could do one thing for me and like, follow or subscribe to the channel on your podcast listening app, just enables us to grow the show. Thank you.